Good for the 4th of July, Jackson Meadows. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. We welcome in our friend. Do we have the audio yet? Let me know when we do. We welcome in our friend Tom Luginbill, National College Football Analyst with ESPN. Lugs joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Tom Luginbill, do you? I don't know if you saw it over the weekend, but Ed Orgeron attempted to take his shirt off at a wedding in New Orleans. Did you see any of that video, my man?
I caught a glimpse of it. So what is that, the second time he's done that in front of a crowd?
Yeah. Do you remember the first time you – so I'm trying to think maybe when this could have lined up.
I remember it.
All right, when was the first time you met him?
Oh, the first time I met him, I thought you were asking the first time he did that in front of the Ole Miss football team, if you remember that.
Oh, I remember that, yes.
Yeah, remember he walked into the team meeting right as he got tired and started tearing his shirt off and going crazy.
So good. Yeah.
I first met Coach O when he was the defensive line coach for Lane at Tennessee.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That was a short stint.
That was a good staff, though, man. They were like, there was some good. Jim Chaney was on that staff. Yeah. Ed Orgeron, Lane Kiffin. I want to say Eddie Grand was on that staff potentially. I mean, there were some good football coaches there.
So, what was your initial impression of you? You had been at ESPN, I guess, for a few years, and I don't know if you were doing recruiting or previewing Tennessee football or what was going on. But what was your initial impression of Ed Orgeron?
That he was a mix between exactly how you would envision a strength coach, who happened to be a position coach.
Yes. That's so good.
I still look at him that way.
Yeah.
You know, I still think that's what he is.
I agree. He's an amazing case study because he's made millions of dollars. He's one of those people. I think you'll know where I'm going here. We all are around some of these guys that may not be the smoothest or most refined, but they have unwavering belief in themselves. And I met him, within the first couple of weeks he took the Ole Miss job. We had him on the show. Mm-hmm. I couldn't understand a damn thing he said, but we even had an Ole Miss fan. I'll never forget this. This was a long time ago, but I'll never forget. We did an interview with him, and an Ole Miss fan called into the show afterwards and said, "Will you translate that for me, Bo?" And we just all started laughing, just because he's got that thick South Louisiana
accent. Sure.
Yeah. So don't you agree? I mean, he's a guy who probably shouldn't have made it, but you see a lot of guys like that are rough around the edges that just have this unwavering faith, belief in themselves that they are going to make it big. And as much as we laughed at him over the years, he ended up winning a national championship, Tom, which I would have bet a lot of money that would have never happened. Luke.
Well, listen, I mean, I think first, I don't know if I would say he's a guy that would have never made it. I think that he was one of those guys that became on the trail amongst his peers an elite recruiter.
Yes.
And when that started to happen, his stock started to go up, and then the asking price goes up. And even if you're just a position coach, if your greatest trait is the ability to evaluate and recruit and sign guys, the head coach can monitor and get the most out of that person from an on-the-field instruction standpoint. But guys can either recruit, guys can either connect, guys can develop relationships, or they can't. And I think that's where he really, really excelled, and probably still to this day would excel. Now, does that mean that you should be a coordinator? Maybe not. Does that mean you should be a head coach? Maybe not. But at the end of the day, I mean, honestly, when it comes down to winning and losing, it's about players, right?
Sure.
And so you might have looked at Ed Orgeron and said, there's no way this guy's a head coach. Look at what happened at Ole Miss, and he hadn't been a coordinator. He's basically a lifetime position coach. But when you've got great players, it doesn't matter. Like, great players trump all of those things. And even if things are dysfunctional, or maybe they're not as organized, or maybe they're not the blueprint isn't what, let's just say, a Nick Saban would use, or an Urban Meyer would use, or what have you. If you can recruit great players, you've got a chance to be a really good football team. And I think whether it's his time at SC, his time at Tennessee, his time at LSU, brief stint in the NFL there as a defensive line coach, you're always going to have a job, because if you want one, because you have a long-standing history of evaluating and signing great players.
Yeah. No, you make a good point. He was labeled an elite recruiter under Pete Carroll at Southern Cal. And he may have been even before that at Miami, ran into a little bit of deal, whatever. But he was that, and it was right at the time where the money was coming into the game. So like you said, the price of poker, for Eddie O just got, if you can get players, he was going to be highly sought after and get paid. And
I remember, do you know Lance Thompson?
Yes.
Okay, so Lance actually was on the staff that recruited me to Georgia Tech. At that time, he was not an on-field coach. He was a DFO type of guy that was working into becoming an on-the-field coach. And Lance was very similar in the sense that he could recruit, he could connect, and he could sign really good players. And then he latched on with he initially had latched on with George O'Leary, but then he latched on with Nick Saban.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, as the salaries were starting to grow, like I remember vividly when he left Alabama, I think to join Lane at Tennessee, I think they paid him like $400,000 to be a position coach. Like that was unheard of. Like that did not happen, right? And now we're seeing that now with regularity. In fact, a lot more, depending on who you are, who you're working for, and where you're at. And so you're right. The time, and listen, the timing of it was perfect for Coach O. It was perfect for a lot of guys that came up through the ranks. Where the old saying used to be, "You're never going to get rich in coaching," and that was a true statement for 50 some odd years.
Mm-hmm.
And then cable television was invented.
That's right.
And everything changed.
That's right. That's right. Tom Luginbill with ESPN on the Out of Bounds show and the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Jackson, you want to drop the all right, Lugs, we're going to drop a little audio here of Steve Spurrier on the Pat Dooley podcast talking about Arch Manning, and then I want you and I to pontificate on this.
Carolina's back-to-back.
I think most people are picking Texas to win the SEC football.
Most
correct?
people are. I think that is going to be the consensus preseason pick.
They've got Arch Manning already winning the Heisman too.
Yep.
And my question is, if he was this good, how come they let Quinn Ewers play all the time last year? If
even though he was hurt a lot.
Yeah,
and he's still
and he was a 7th-round pick.
Yes, exactly.
And Arch is going.
And now they're saying Arch is going to be the first pick.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a good point.
Well, you only have to ask the coach Sark. How come you played that one instead of this one? Hopefully he'll say because we thought he was better in that one.
Yeah.
Isn't that why you played one guy and not the other? Unless it's a discipline, and there was no discipline or anything.
You were never hesitant about pulling guys.
One guy,
putting the guy best
one
guy
guy
in.
struggling.
Yeah, I mean, Spurrier would rotate guys every play. Tom Luginbill, who played quarterback at Georgia Tech, joining us on the Out of Bounds show. Lugs, your reaction to Spurrier's hit with Pat Dooley on Arch Manning?
I don't necessarily disagree with his assessment, and I think it's a really fair question to ask. On the other side of, I think, the debate is, I think there was a plan all along in place for Arch Manning. And it was a plan that was devised and agreed upon by the family, by Coach Sark, of how they were going to bring him along, because they knew they had a guy in Quinn Ewers that was ahead of Arch, had already played a lot of football, was starting to help to turn the program around, And quite honestly, I think in the first year where Arch redshirted, he probably wasn't ready to be the guy. Probably wasn't there yet, and that's fine. This last year, I think you could make an argument that when Arch Manning played, he played better than Quinn Ewers played last year. So I don't think I don't think Coach Spurrier is, out of his tree with that assessment. But I also think, in the minds of a lot of coaches, and Coach Spurrier was never like this, so I can see why he sees it this way. But a lot of them are going to take the more experienced older guy, and they're going to play that guy as long as that guy's playing, pretty good football, and they're winning games, which Texas was doing. They just happened to get injured last year at the quarterback spot, and then we all of a sudden saw, just in brief glimpses, what it looks like Arch Manning's going to be capable of. But I think I don't necessarily think it's fair to just completely dismiss the amount of good football that Quinn Ewers played at his time at the University of Texas. And, that's been a program prior to Sark and Quinn Ewers' arrival that was struggling to even become a major factor again in college football. Yeah. And I think that guy deserves a lot of credit for getting them over the hump.
Yeah. 2025, I see Arch Manning dominating college football. Your thoughts?
I think he's certainly capable, but I also think the reason why he's capable and the reason why he has been set up for success is how they brought him along, by not throwing him to the wolves, allowing him to grow and mature at a reasonable rate, not balking at redshirting, getting stronger, getting smarter when it comes to theory of the game and learning the scheme and being able to master the things that you'd like your starting quarterback to master. They have brought him along, kind of spoon-fed him here and there, and then turned him loose a little bit last year to see what he would do and how he would respond, and he responded very, very well. All of the things that I just listed are the reason why I think he is poised to have tremendous success. If you were to sit there and say to me, okay, Arch Manning's coming out of high school, and I think he is going to have a dominant first season at Texas in 2023, I would have completely disagreed with that assessment if somebody were to say that, because he wasn't in the same position that he's in now. And I think the position that he's in now, because of how they manufactured the process, gives him the best shot to be successful.
Yeah. Schedule lines up. Like you said, he's been able to wait and grow up. Sark and the crew have surrounded him with great players. Yeah. I think it's the best roster in the country right now. Doesn't mean they'll win it, but I think what they've done at the high school level combined with the portal and the coaching staff, they're in the catbird seat, but some other teams could pick them off. And that schedule's pretty. I mean, I know they go to Georgia, but it looks good. It's got 10-2, and that's all it takes to get in. And once you're in, you can win it. All right, let's switch gears. That was Steve Spurrier audio on Arch Manning. This was right in, for you and I were in college at the same time, and that's when Spurrier started dominating. Why did the fun and gun and Steve Spurrier dominate college football for that 12-year stint? And look, to win 11, it wasn't quite the same, but still, to win 11 games 3 years in a row at a program like South Carolina, to me, is beyond remarkable and unbelievable. But why did Spurrier dominate with the fun and gun?
Well, I think, first of all, people have incorrect perception of the fun and gun, in the sense that this was a team that was throwing the ball all over the lot, okay? At his 3 highest years at the University of Florida, Florida led the SEC in rushing. Rushing, not throwing the football. And I think so. What that tells me, number one, they had great players. They had tremendous weapons. They had a quarterback, obviously. It was Shane Matthews, and it was Danny Werfel, and then it, of course, matriculated to Doug Johnson and Jesse Palmer and a variety of other guys, Rex Grossman, all of those guys. But they had really good quarterback play. They could run the football, and they were great on defense. And so when you look and fast forward to the South Carolina tenure, those 3 early recruiting classes, you go back to the 08, 09, 10, and really probably 4, 11. Remember who those guys were? Stephon Gilmore, Marcus Lattimore, Jadeveon Clowney, Alshon Jeffrey. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of elite level players. And by the way, a lot of those guys, that just happened to be at a time where those were all in-state kids. And Clemson couldn't sign any of them. Right? So I think the timing really was the when he took the South Carolina job, whether he knew it or not, there were classes of 3 to 4 in the state of South Carolina before Clemson figured it out of dominant players that they were all able to keep at home. And so I think, I think sometimes because Steve Spurrier is an offensive guy, that he doesn't get enough credit for the defenses that his teams have had throughout the years. People forget that Bob Stoops took the Oklahoma job after being the coordinator at Florida.
Yeah.
That seems like a long time ago, right? And so I think that as an overall runner of a program, and listen, he'll tell you this, he's not going to stay in the office until 3 o'clock in the morning. He wasn't going to go and waste endless hours on things that he didn't think were important. Now, there's a lot of people who say, well, you're going to have to grind at this if you're going to get it done. And I think there's truth to that as well. But this was a guy that had a very clear vision of how he was going to do the job, but he always made sure he had great players because great players mask everything else.
Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds show. He's one of the best ever.
Yeah.
I know he's only got one championship. I could still put him in the top 5 for what he did to the game, to the you know this, but having grown up in it, I mean, we were 3 yards in a cloud of dust league prior to his arrival.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. At that time we had, I mean, you look at what Dooley was doing at Georgia, Dye was doing at Auburn, Majors at Tennessee, eventually Fulmer. Alabama was, run under Curry and then Gene Stallings, and the list goes on. And he comes in, and you're right. I mean, he had some unbelievable running backs go through Florida. Incredible.
Oh, yeah.
And they ran it, but they would also throw it all over you too. And he made everybody like break out of the 4-3, 5-2 defense and actually, or you just couldn't cover them, Luke. I mean, I still tell Chris Doring, you ran wide open for 3 straight years. Of course you should have been good. I have to give him a hard time.
You had Chris Doring. Then after that, remember you had Ike Green, Riddell Anthony. Who was the other one? There was a third one that was, Jaquez Green, Riddell Anthony.
Yes. Yes.
And then 2 or 3 other guys. And these guys were after Chris Doring, and so they made you. They were going to run the football, and if you decided that you were going to load the box, they had guys on the perimeter that were better than yours.
Yeah. How good was Fred Taylor at Florida and then in the NFL with the Jaguars?
Yeah. Blues? How about Eric Rhett before him?
Oh, Rhett was number 33.
I mean, yeah, great play. I mean, and you're right. Fred Taylor was just an absolute monster of a back, and so those. And let's not forget, those teams had guys on defense like Kevin Carter. Okay, they had linebacker play. There was, again, we probably don't give enough credit to those Spurrier coach teams for the guys that they were playing with on defense.
Well, and this, the 80s and 90s rankings were not refined, and everybody was doing their best, and they were putting it, they were having to like print it out, weeks and months later.
Yeah, exactly.
You eventually, the new wave of all y'all getting in here in the .com, and you're able to report kind of on site and do a much better job of evaluating and ranking players, totally changed the game. I've got about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Give me your. This is what we do midsummer. Give me your legit national champs. Is it 2, 3, 4 teams? How many teams do you believe can win it this year?
Oh, I think Penn State's legitimate. I think Clemson is legitimate. Obviously, you got to expect that Georgia, Alabama are legitimate. We're going to have to see what happens with LSU on defense, but obviously offensively they're completely legitimate. Texas. I think there's plenty out there, but you know what's different more so than it's ever been before is you have to get into that group of 12 and get hot at the right time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like you could be a really, really good team and a national championship team on paper, and you could be that in the first 6-7 weeks of the season. Next thing you know, you have an injury or you lose momentum, and some reason you play bad road or what happens. Similar to like Ole Miss last year, right? And did Ole Miss have college football playoff caliber players? Yeah, but you can't lose to LSU in Florida, right? So you put yourself out of it late, whereas you had a team like Notre Dame and a team like Ohio State that were surging late. People forget Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois.
Yeah.
Right? But that wasn't the same team in week 12 that they were in week 2.
Right. So you didn't say
Notre
Ohio.
Dame's another one too. I think Notre Dame might have the best offensive line in college football.
Loaded on the offensive line.
Yeah.
Okay.
Running backs are fantastic.
But
you got to see if their quarterback pans out.
20 seconds. You don't believe Ohio State has enough juice after what they'll be good, but not enough juice to make it all the way to the finish line.
I actually think that they will be good enough. I have the same assessment of them as I do of Notre Dame. If the quarterback pans out, then we're having a different conversation. That's what we don't know yet, right?
Yeah.
And that's why a team like a Penn State, like an LSU, even Gunnar Stockton at Georgia, Cade Klubnik at Clemson, we talked about Arch Manning. There are bona fide, proven commodities with some of these other teams, whereas on Alabama, on Ohio State, on Notre Dame, some of these other, they're having to come up with.
Lugs, we appreciate it, buddy. We'll do it again next week.